Reading 124 from the Psychological Commentaries on the Teaching of Gurdjieff and Ouspensky by Dr. Maurice Nicoll, Volume 3. Great Animal House, June 5th, 1948. The Transformation of Impressions. Work teaching. Gurdjieff once said, about 70% of people are ill from psychological reasons. For example, from wrong impressions. Commentary. It can be said that there are, to begin with, 3 definite sources of illness, according to the work teaching. The human machine takes in 3 quite distinct foods, all necessary for it. We all realize vaguely that lack of the right food, in the ordinary sense of food, can lead to 1,001 sorts of illness. Lack of citrus food, for example, causes scurvy and all its minor manifestations. Lack of fresh milk, butter or cod liver oil, etc., causes rickets in the young and other things in the older people. Lack of certain necessary parts of wheat or rice damages the nervous system in different ways. Too much or too little fat or meat or cereals causes illness of endless varieties. I say that we realize that wrong food, in the ordinary meaning of the word, can be the source of many illnesses. But what we do not realize is that the human machine, for its right working, does not depend only upon this one kind of food. It depends on 2 other kinds of food, not as yet in ordinary medicine as clearly recognized, as is the dependence of the body on food in the ordinary sense, although sunlight, which belongs to impressions, is recognized as a food in a way. These 2 other foods are formulated in the work as air and impressions. People do not think air is a food. Still less do they think that impressions are a food. So I will remind you again of the diagram of the 3 foods entering the human machine and make some further comments. You will notice that in the diagram, man is represented as a 3-story building or house. Into each floor or story, a different kind of food enters. The figures 768, 192, and 48 indicate the relative finenesses or quality of the food. Ordinary food for man, 768, is, so to speak, coarse food and requires many transformations in the human machine, that is, successive digestions, to be serviceable. Air is less coarse, less dense, and undergoes finer digestions or transformations in the body. And again, impressions are still less dense, that is, far finer. Now, the finer a substance is, in this sense of successive transformations, the more powerful its effects. It is difficult to find analogies. We connect the word powerful with physical force, physical violence, but this is not what is meant. A finely bred racehorse is more powerful, in the work sense, than a cart horse. Why? It is much cleverer. Also, as you have heard, Gurdjieff said a cooked potato is cleverer than a raw one. So one has to think for oneself, what in the work means finer quality? All substances that are of a finer quality are termed cleverer. A cooked potato can be eaten by man, a raw one by animals. And remember, as some of you can, that we ourselves can be and are eaten, for we are foods. Yes, just imagine, we, strutting about and eating everything on the earth as by right. We are also, in turn, eaten by beings we do not know, in the scale of being represented by the ray of creation. If we are cleverer, we will be absorbed mentally into beings of a higher level and participate in things quite marvelous that coarser beings cannot participate in. Enough of that side of the work for the moment, except to say that a person stuffed with attitudes, pride, self-merit, false personality, and the rest of it is not acceptable food to beings of a higher level of intelligence. The substance or energy rendered as 768, ordinary food, is not such a clever substance as 192, or, in turn, as 48. let us speak once more about this energy substance that enters the top compartment of the 3-story factory that is called impressions and numbered 48. Impressions can undergo 3 transformations: 48 into 24, 24 into 12, and 12 into 6. Now, as Gurdjieff said in so many words, a man can be ill from wrong food of impressions. He added that most illnesses originate here. That is, most ill people are ill at first, psychologically. If you ask me, what is a psychological illness? I will answer, it has to do with this top compartment, whose food is impressions. What impressions you take in and identify with, and so how you receive them and how you transform, digest them. I suppose you all know, by self-observation, that if you become suspicious, you tend only to take in impressions of others, of the outer, visible scene, that amplify your suspicions. It is so easy to suspect, and so difficult to become passive to what others do and say. A simple trick comes in here by the forces whose object it is to keep us asleep and use us. Just a little hint, and if you have only fixed attitudes and no inner individual thought, it is just as if you descend into hell and remain there. Why? Because you gave way to the worst of all negative emotions that infest the emotional center. Is it not the easiest thing in the world to suspect? Everything seems to fit together. And is it not the most difficult thing in the world to suspect yourself, or being suspicious? Suspicion is always due to identifying. And remember, identifying is not love, and leads to hate so very quickly. Now, this is an example of how the food of impressions can make us ill, and it applies to all of us. Now let us take what is called nostalgia, or homesickness. I have seen in the First War, when abroad, so many cases of, as it were, physical collapse, the source of which lay in the sphere of impressions. There were no longer the accustomed impressions coming in from the dear home, the dear country, from darling mummy, and so on. So the person becomes ill, not through lack of ordinary food or air, but through lack of impressions. Can you catch what is meant here? Such people are not yet adult. In the case of a man, he is not yet adult. His head is turned backwards. His spirit goes backwards. So wherever he goes, even round the earth, he really takes in no new impressions, because he is longing for what by now should not be his goal. I certainly am not going to speak of how it is with woman in this matter. Now, a man, a woman, can look backwards, psychologically speaking, or look forwards. Here, in the work, a great struggle is delineated, about which I will only say that if you believe in all this work teaches, you will be able to look forwards. And I am not speaking of new success in business, or women, or appointments, or honor. No, I mean that something internal reverses its direction, and you then realize that one must never look back. Christ said, "No man having put his hand to the plow and looking back is fit for the kingdom of God." Luke 9:62. Now, if you habitually receive impressions negatively, you will inevitably look back and so become ill. Not only that, if you are in the work, you will not be able to get on in it, because whatever force you may make by work efforts will always be eaten by these habitual negative emotions, which will cause you to lose all sense of direction. That is why the work lays such great emphasis to begin with upon the necessity to make conscious to yourself your negative emotions by self-observation, and to become aware of them. For only in this way can you begin to work on them and not identify with them. If most of one's incoming impressions mechanically nourish negative thoughts and emotions, how great is one's inner darkness, and how far one is from the work. Now, impressions coming in as energy 48 can undergo, as was said, 3 transformations. that is, to a finer, cleverer, more intelligent energy numbered 24, then to 12, and finally to 6, which is the highest, cleverest energy that man can produce. But this does not happen in nature. It does not take place in man asleep, in mechanical man. Only when you begin to work on impressions and how you receive them in the light of a set of ideas that are not derived from life, as it appears, can this transformation of impressions begin. When I ask you, have you transformed today in this respect? Your human machine has already transformed considerable quantities of energy 768 into finer and finer matters. Yes, but that is done for you. The transformation of the food, called impressions, is not done for you, and this is where a mechanical man can begin to cease to be a mechanical man. Transformation of impressions is called in the work giving oneself the first conscious shock. Yes, you have heard this before, no doubt, but have you ever tried to give yourself this conscious shock? Have you ever tried to take in incoming impressions from the world in quite a new way? Certainly you will be unable to do so if you have not yet begun to think in a new way. And remember, the work, with all its teaching and its ideas, is to make us think in a new way. That is, unless you have, for yourself, begun to see any truth in the work teaching, you will never be able to give yourself the first conscious shock. That is, you will never be able to take in impressions in a new way, which is the same as saying that you will never be able to transform impressions. Remember that another person is impressions, and all external life is impressions that you can receive and react to in one way or in another way. A person is impressions and their effect on you. Can you see what is meant?